Hello, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me
Sure.
today. How are you?
Sonia, good. Thanks for having me. I
Oh, it's,
appreciate it.
it's my pleasure. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive right in. Tell me about your business. You've got two businesses, actually. You've got Angor Digital, your consultancy, and you also got an app that's super cool, Rolodexter.
Yes. So the Anchor Digital is a digital consulting and traditional marketing consulting firm as well. So I've worked with small companies and large companies, both on product launch and readiness to positioning and messaging, as well as connected healthcare. So, which is a big component, obviously, from the digital side. And so when I set off my own, I really was trying to do two at once. Was the consulting piece, but also really pursue an app startup that I'd wanted to do for quite a while called Rolodexter, as you mentioned. And Rolodexter is an app that I wanted to do for quite some time, and the way I've referred to it is as a personal relationship manager. So, and it's dubbed your relationship concierge. So, nothing to do with dating. It's more focused on just helping you stay in better and in more frequent contact with the most important people in your life. And doing that with just simple tools that are built into the app, from reminders to knowing your schedule to connecting you with the right person at the right time, when you both are available. And so, um, over the last couple of years, I've kind of split half and half between the consulting and the app. And yeah, it's been really exciting. Well,
Sweet. Sweet. Now, what would you say is a specific problem that you saw for the people that you serve? You kind of alluded to it a little bit for Rolodexter, but what would you
mhm.
say what they are?
Well, when I went into it, it was really three things. Firstly, I think like a lot of people who build an app, it's trying to solve something that they probably had a problem on their own. And for me, it was a problem I was trying to solve just for myself, which was I just never was good at staying in regular contact with people for no other reason other than out of sight, out of mind sometimes. Whether it's an ex-boss or, an old college friend or whomever. It was just, I was just never good at it. Some people are really, really good at it. I wasn't. So the app was really aimed at three things that I think a lot of people experience in their daily lives. One is, the expanding network of connections you have, right, across the multiple social media channels you have. And my theory really was that the lines between those are blurring a lot too. And so you might be connected with somebody on LinkedIn and friends with them on Facebook too. And so there's not really this siloed approach anymore in terms of where your friends sit in which social networks. And so the aim with Rolodexter was it doesn't really matter where they are. If you just want to make sure that you're staying in regular contact with them. So, if it's an old boss, you're top of mind. If another opportunity comes around, what have you. That was one of the real main reasons. So tackling that large network issue, the limited time I think we all have to get in contact with people on a regular basis. So the app really focuses on trying to find those little um, what we call moments of serendipity where you're available and somebody on the other side may be available and prompting you to make connections. And then a third is really around this notion with smartphones, which I'm sure a lot of people experiences, and what I've called notification fatigue, which is a lot of these apps, and I've downloaded a bunch when I was doing research. Before you even get out of bed in the morning, you already have that bubble over the app, and it has 12 tasks for you to do, and you haven't even gotten out of bed yet. So I really wanted to build it in a way that it thought more smartly about when it would notify you based on your schedule. It knows, where you are, your communication preferences, what have you. It would then give you those notifications at the best possible time so that you could actually act on it. So those are the three areas that I was trying to solve. People's growing networks, the lack of time to follow up with those, and then just being overwhelmed by the smartphone tools that are built into your phones that sometimes you just end up ignoring because they're just unmanageable.
Right. No, I totally hear you. Now, you mentioned that this is a problem that you had, which a lot of us have like problems, annoyances, but we don't actually do anything about it. We just stay annoyed,
Right.
right? So, what made you decide that you were going to be the one to solve the problem?
Well, so when I did leave and go off my own, I started really getting plugged more into the tech community within Philadelphia and socializing the idea and got a lot of positive feedback from folks just thinking, oh yeah, it'd be great. That's a problem I have. So part of it was just validating that I wasn't alone in this thinking. There wasn't anything scientific about the research other than just a lot of networking and events that I went to. Um, but like I said, I think it's always better if it's a problem that you have yourself because you're more motivated to figure out how to solve it, right? And so I think that was one of the drivers for me that made me really want to do it. Also, just coming from a background of both marketing and technology, I felt more comfortable, even though I wasn't going to code the app myself, which was a challenge in and of itself. I felt more comfortable in pursuing the work because I understood it and could speak with, people who knew the technology and how to build. And then lastly, just I've spent a lot of time in my career in the past in CRM. So just understanding that concept of relationship management, I felt like the technology and just the need to solve my own problem selfishly really was one of the drivers for me to do it.
Hey, as long whatever it takes to
Right.
work. But we all have different motivations for starting things. But yeah, I'm always curious as to what makes people get going on that. All right, well, let's
Yeah.
change gears a little bit and talk more about your experiences as an entrepreneur. Now, what
Mhm.
would you say overall was the biggest barrier and mindset that you experienced that limited your success in some way, and how did you overcome it?
Um, I, I think nobody likes to admit this, but part of it I think is the fear of the unknown, right? And so when you take that first step out, and if you come from a large company like I did, where you have limitless resources seemingly to do what needs to be done, business partners. I think a lot of that can be intimidating. Just something as simple as how do I even file my business, to trademarks, to the legal and financial aspects of it. And so I think that was, probably the biggest barrier in my mind was just understanding that every time I did something, I was never done it before, and so I had to kind of teach myself as I went along. I think the benefit, as I'm sure there's so many self-service software platforms out there now to help you with everything from expense tracking to trademark filing to your bookkeeping, that it makes it so much easier to do it now than it was 10 years ago. And so I think the biggest barrier was just every day waking up, sure, think, okay, I don't know how to do this. Let me research something and figure out how to do it, and then either find a tool to help me or find somebody doing this on their own to help me as well. And it's just brute force, trial and error, which I think is something a lot of new founders face into.
Right. It's definitely true. Now, how did you decide whenever you were researching things, I'm going to figure this out on my own versus I'm going to hire somebody to help me on these things? Was there sort of like a line of demarcation that helps you figure out like when you could do it yourself
Right.
versus when you shouldn't?
Yeah, I think part of that is just knowing what you, at least understanding what you can and can't do, or having a good sense of where your skill sets are, right? So if it was something technology related, I felt more comfortable to really try to dive in and learn, whether it was a software as a service that was available or something like that. But when it was more important things where the mistakes are, and if you really screw it up, you could do a lot more damage. Things like trademark and legal, I think are just areas that sometimes LegalZoom will do the job, but sometimes you want a human on the other end that you can talk to that
Right.
says, no, you might have forgotten X, Y, or Z. And especially from the trademark perspective, I think that was one of the biggest areas where having a trademark attorney was extraordinarily helpful.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about your habits. I know we used to work together, so I know you're super organized. And as you've been an entrepreneur, are there any habits or suite of habits that you follow or subscribe to that helps you keep everything together, accomplish a lot as you're building two businesses, like, two
Right.
different separate things? How did
hmm
is there any habits that kind of help you get all that done?
Well, you and I both work with salespeople quite a bit. And I don't think I really truly appreciated what it's like to work, out of a home office and work for yourself until I started doing it.
Yeah.
And I think the thing I've always heard people tell me is, even if your own home, separate your workspace from the home space, so that, when you walk out of that, even if it's your home office, work is done for the day, even though it's really never done. But I think for me that in the beginning, I was too casual. I'd get up, I wouldn't shower. Just in my shorts and t-shirt and working at the computer because, and initially, at least from the app side, it's not like I had to be in front of clients a lot. So I think one thing I started realizing was you really just have to treat it like, So getting up in the morning to go to the office and do all the same routines that you typically would do, and dedicate that time in the office to truly being in your home office. And then when you're out, don't just wander off and watch a 30-minute program in the middle of the day because you can, which is challenging. But also, from staying regimented, like you said, I think there are so many tools out there for time tracking, from when I'm doing consulting or, meeting milestones, project management, what have you. I think it's really important to, as fluid as entrepreneurship is sometimes, as much as you can stay regimented in following those tasks as they come up. So tracking expenses immediately when you get them, or, staying true to your milestones and meeting those milestones. And, that's the counsel I got a lot even from the app side, is that even though you're off doing your own thing and it's a little more loose, once you start sitting down, you're talking to fundraisers, they want to be able to see a history of delivery and meeting milestones. And I think that's really important, that you are disciplined and regimented in terms of how you document and follow those.
For sure. Was there a tipping point for you in transitioning from, oh my gosh, I've got all this freedom, I'm just going to work, and like you said, you're working, you haven't showered yet, you haven't, sort of gone through those routines, versus, oh yeah, I actually have to treat this the same way. Even though I'm working from home, I need to treat this with the same level of rigor that I would if I was going to an office. What caused you to make that adjustment?
So on the app development side, I think it was a little less, it didn't pressure as much, because there was really nobody to answer to, right? It was my idea. I was working with developers that I was paying. I didn't really have to answer to anybody. So, not that you shouldn't be disciplined then, but I think it really kicked in more when you start getting some of the consulting engagements, because then, you're basically then like you would be working in an office, right? You may be in your home office, or you're driving out to go to meetings. So once some of that business started kicking in more, and the important part then was I was really splitting time basically 50-50. So I had to be better and more judicious about where I focus my time and when I focus my time, and how I schedule that accordingly between the two.
Okay.
So I think that was the biggest driver. I think one of the things that was hugely helpful, and I wish I could say I timed this by design, but I left my corporate role June 1st. And I kind of made the conscious decision that summer was no work. And so I had 3 months that was just, you almost have to unlearn everything you've just been doing, and the procedures and the thought processes and everything that you had working in such a big company environment. So I really didn't do anything and it was perfect timing to have the summer months, but that was really helpful. And I think it's, you need that break, I think, a little bit to just reset your brain.
Yeah, no, that's a really smart move, but you do, because you have to shed a lot of bad habits. I discovered that a lot of things that make you successful as working in a big corporate environment don't help you as an entrepreneur. So you need time to sort of get rid of those. All right.
Exactly.
What would you say are your 3 keys to success?
Well, the one thing I know for sure is perseverance. As I'm sure you've read this a million times, and this isn't anything I'm sure new to a lot of the folks that'll be listening to this, but every day is an up or down, right? And there could be really great days and really bad days, and just pushing through those. Whether it's on whatever you're doing, but in my particular case, whether it's just a really challenging project I'm working on for a client, or just technical problems I'm trying to overcome that I have no idea how to do it. I'm trying to work with developers to figure that out. I think just being as driven as you possibly can to push through those problem times, I think, is one of the biggest parts. And I think second would be, having as best a mixture of confidence with humility at the same time, because there are so many things you don't know, and you have to rely on other people, and you have to be willing to ask for help and ask questions, but you have to remain confident. Sometimes that's not easy to balance those two. And the third part is, I think, just always be selling, right? No matter what you're doing, you're always selling yourself, your product, the business, whatever it is that you're doing, you're always selling.
Right. Along
Yeah.
those lines with selling, was that something that you resisted at all? I know that's not your background, but
Right,
whenever you're the founder, you're the owner, it's your baby. You have to get people to see why it's so wonderful, right? So
right.
how did you adjust to that role and embracing that role, so that you could build and grow your businesses?
Yeah, that's probably been the biggest challenge for me, just because I don't think I'm a purebred salesperson, and so um, you know getting out there and really talking as much as you can about what you're doing and selling, even selling people in a very informal way about the idea and getting people excited about the idea. And that's really where just, the tech communities in whatever city you're in are wonderful for that because of the numerous amount of networking events that they have. Um, and I think one of the ways I overcame it, and something that I learned pretty quickly, just from I heard it over and over and over again very early in the networking, was talk about your idea. Don't be afraid to talk about your idea.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think, especially from a technology perspective, I mean, it's different if you have something that truly is unique or patentable or um, something that you really want to keep a secret. Generally, I don't know how many times I've heard the phrase, there's no new ideas out there. Like
Mm-hmm.
what separates the idea from success is execution. And so a lot of people sometimes may be nervous to talk about their idea with other people because they think, oh, they're going to take it from me. And chances are they're not going to, because they're not going to execute on it. And that's what that's what separates you from them, is that if you're able to execute on the idea. So early on, I had a couple different ideas that I was kicking around from a technology perspective, and I was a little apprehensive sometimes in sharing details about it, especially when I would run into people that were doing seemingly similar things.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found, very early on from listening to that advice is absolutely true. I would talk about it with as many people as you can, because chances are you're going to learn a heck of a lot more than the risk of anybody taking your idea and beating you to market with it.
Right, right. And I've heard a lot of people be nervous and apprehensive about that whole somebody's going to take my idea, but like you said, it's a lot of work to bring an idea to life. And even if you're telling
Hmm.
somebody the details of it, it's almost impossible for them to see it the way you see it.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. It's super helpful, and it makes your idea even better a lot of times whenever you're talking to people and they're able to
Hmm.
give you insights, in different points of view that you might not have been able to think of before.
True, true. And for me, I think the biggest challenge was I was a solo founder, so I didn't have a co-founder. I didn't have either, like in the case of the app, my tech partner that could just sit down and bang out the code,
Mm-hmm.
or even at that time, and I still don't, just because it's still very new, have a team of individuals. So sometimes you kind of fall into that trap where you are working on your own, out of your home, and you don't have people to bounce things off of.
Mm-hmm.
So, as much as you can get to those types of networking events and share ideas, it's the only time, if you don't have a team around you, it's the only time you really have to get feedback, in an informal manner.
For sure, for sure. All right, Chris, this has been super cool. Where can people find you?
So it's funny, ironically, I'm not on, every single social media channel out there. So I've always been a big believer of social media, that it kind of follows very much. It's just a mirror to, who you are. And I've never been a super oversharer. So, ironically, for what I'm doing, I don't have a lot of channels out there in terms of, Instagram, where I'm the personal blog. I had my website, rolandexter.com, LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. Um, Handles CGC 3405, and yeah, that's it.
That's okay. You're probably much
So
more efficient that way.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll have all that information in
So,
the show notes so people can find it, and go
yeah.
check out Rolla Dexter for sure. All right.
Okay.
Well, before I let you go, I do have another question just to dig into your brain a little bit more. And
Hmm.
that's to deliver a line from a movie that speaks to you And explain
Hmm.
why you chose that one.
Well, I'm a movie buff, so I have too many movie quotes usually juggling around in my head at one time. But now that you mention that, there is one that I've kept in my head for years, especially even just from days working in technology too, and it's from Jurassic Park. And there's a great line, and I think it's just super applicable, not just in what I was doing then, but even in almost everything that you do. And that it was, I forget how it exactly goes, but it was Jeff Goldblum's characters who was worried about what the scientist was doing and with creating these dinosaurs. And he said, essentially, your scientists were too preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think whether they should.
Yeah, I remember that.
And
Yeah.
it's pretty compelling because you think about that. We all chase trends, we all chase the newest buzzword or chase the newest buzzwords. And I think from a business standpoint, sometimes you have to stop and think, okay, I know we could do this, but should we do it? Is it important to the business? Is it going to drive the business forward? And so I've always kept that with me in various different business roles I've had because I think it's a really cool quote and it helps kind of bring you back down to earth when there's a lot of hype surrounding whatever the latest trend is.
For sure. That's a good one. And you're right. Like there's so many bright shiny objects out there
Mm.
with all these things that you could be doing, and everybody says this is the latest thing that you should be doing. You should be. But like you
Right.
have to really consider it from your business standpoint. Is this the thing that's going to move the needle towards your goals? But also, yeah, like from a broader perspective, I know there are some moral implications from Jurassic Park, but I mean, you have to think about those
Yeah.
too as you're
Yeah.
running your business. Just kind of along those same lines, as you're working to figure out what you should be doing, um, how do you stay in tune with your customers? Because you talked a lot about you're working on this by yourself. It was out of a
Right.
need that came from something that you had. How do you balance the building something that works perfectly for you with making sure that you're building it to meet the needs of their customers, just to make sure that those two things are aligned?
Right. Right. Well, honestly, I don't know if I have that formula down yet. I
Mm-hmm.
think, the two different businesses are very different. So, from a consulting perspective, it's very easy to get feedback, right? You're on the phone with your clients and you're pitching ideas, you're discussing things, you're brainstorming ideas. So I think on that side of the business, it's not hard at all
Okay.
because you're getting, real time feedback, and it's just part of the job when you do that. Um, Apps are a little different, right? And I think it varies based on what type of app that you're building, whether it's something that's enterprise focused and you do have a client per se that you can go to
Mm-hmm.
and get real time feedback versus something like I did, which is certainly much more risky, and that is put something out just for the general consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not always easy to reach those folks, right? Whether they're willing to take surveys, which I've been surprised at the lower response rate on surveys.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's still a work in progress for me in terms of understanding how to gather really good feedback. Other than again socializing your idea, and
Mm-hmm.
now that it's actually out in the public with trusted advisors you have. So I've probably gotten more substantive and good feedback from some folks in the Philadelphia area that have built and run many startups, and just sitting down and walking through the app and getting some feedback
Mm-hmm.
than from, I would say, quote unquote customers, because right now it's a free app, it's available to everybody, and sometimes that's a little bit of a needle in a haystack then
Yeah.
finding those insights from people.
For sure. For sure. Very good. Well, Chris, this has been lots of fun. It's been great
Yeah,
chatting with you
thanks.
again. Thank you
Yes,
so much for stopping by and sharing your experiences and your lessons learned and your wisdom with us. It's been super cool.
happy to. Yeah, thank you.